I was standing in my childhood kitchen arranging 25 candles on my birthday cake when I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. Tonight, my entire family would gather under one roof for the first time in months, and I knew my adopted sister Aria would steal the spotlight again just like she had for the past 13 years. But as I smoothed the frosting and tried to ignore the growing tension, I had no idea that this birthday would finally reveal the shocking truth that had been hidden from me my entire adult life. I just never expected it to happen like this. Before I tell you how my 25th birthday became the night that finally revealed the truth about my family, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you have ever felt like the forgotten child in your own family, and subscribe, because this story has a twist that nobody saw coming. Trust me, you will want to see how this unfolds. I need to take you back 13 years to when everything changed in our household. I was 12 years old, living what I thought was a perfect life with my parents, Robert and Linda. Dad worked as a construction engineer building bridges across our state, while Mom taught third grade at the local elementary school. Our house was filled with the sounds of my piano practice every afternoon and the gentle chaos of my ballet shoes scattered by the front door. Then one rainy Tuesday in October, my parents sat me down in our living room and explained that we would be welcoming a new family member. They were adopting an 8-year-old girl named Aria from the foster care system. Mom's eyes sparkled with tears as she told me how this little girl had lost both her parents and desperately needed a loving home. She explained that I would finally have the little sister I had always wanted someone to teach and protect and love. I remember feeling so excited that I could barely sleep that night. I spent weeks preparing my room, choosing which stuffed animals to share and which books I would read to her. I imagined braiding her hair and teaching her to ride my old bicycle. In my 12-year-old mind, having a sister would be like having a built-in best friend who would look up to me and follow me around with admiration. When Aria first arrived at our house, she clutched a small backpack containing everything she owned in the world. Her dark hair was cut short and uneven, and her eyes darted around our home like a frightened animal. She was so thin that Mom's clothes hung on her like oversized blankets. For the first week, she barely spoke above a whisper and would only eat if Mom sat directly beside her at the dinner table. I tried everything to make her feel welcome. I showed her my art supplies and encouraged her to draw pictures of anything she liked. I read her bedtime stories and let her choose which movies we watched during our family movie nights. Slowly, very slowly, Aria began to open up. She would smile when I taught her card tricks, and she giggled when I showed her how to bake chocolate chip cookies from scratch. Those first few months felt magical. Our family seemed complete in a way I had never noticed it was missing something before. We took weekend trips to the lake where I taught Aria how to skip stones across the water. We had elaborate tea parties in the backyard where she would carefully pour imaginary tea into tiny plastic cups. During those golden autumn days, I felt like the big sister I had always dreamed of becoming. But somewhere around the 6-month mark, subtle changes began creeping into our daily routine. Mom started spending longer periods helping Aria with her homework, patiently explaining math concepts that I had learned easily on my own. When I asked for help with my history project, Mom would say she would be right there, but then I would find her reading with Aria for another hour. Dad began taking Aria on special trips to the hardware store, letting her pick out paint colors for her bedroom and teaching her how to use basic tools. I understood, of course. Aria had been through trauma that I could not even imagine, and she needed extra attention to help her catch up academically and emotionally. I felt proud of our family for giving her the support she deserved. But then my piano lessons were suddenly canceled because the budget was getting tight. My beloved ballet classes ended the following month because we needed to save money for Aria's therapy sessions with a child psychologist. When I brought home my report card with straight A grades, Dad patted my shoulder and said good job, before turning his attention to Aria's improvement in reading comprehension. When Aria managed to spell a difficult word correctly during dinner, both parents erupted in celebration as if she had just won a Nobel Prize. I started to notice that my achievements were mentioned briefly and then forgotten. while Aria's progress became the central topic of every family conversation. By the time I reached high school, the pattern had become so established that I barely questioned it anymore. I threw myself into academics and extracurricular activities, earning a spot on the honor roll every semester and serving on student council for 3 consecutive years. I joined the varsity tennis team and discovered I had natural athletic ability that earned me recognition throughout our school district. But every trophy I brought home seemed to disappear into the garage storage area, while Aria's artwork covered every available wall space in our house. She had discovered an incredible talent for painting and drawing, creating pieces that genuinely impressed our teachers and neighbors. Her bedroom transformed into an art studio, complete with professional easels and expensive supply sets that my parents purchased without hesitation. During parent-teacher conferences, I watched my mom and dad beam with pride as they discussed Aria's remarkable recovery and artistic gifts with her teachers. When it was time to meet with my instructors, they nodded politely as my accomplishments were listed, but their enthusiasm had already been spent. I began to feel like a supporting character in my own family's story, present but not particularly important. The real breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I had worked incredibly hard to earn acceptance into the University of Michigan with a partial academic scholarship. My dream was to study pre-medicine and eventually become a pediatrician, inspired by the doctors who had helped our family navigate Aria's adjustment process. I had researched the program extensively and could barely contain my excitement about starting this new chapter of my life. At the same time, Aria was finishing her freshman year of high school and had been accepted into a prestigious private art academy that cost more than $40,000 per year. The school offered intensive programs with renowned artists and promised to nurture her obvious talents in ways that our local high school simply could not match. My parents called a family meeting to discuss our educational futures. They sat us down in the same living room where they had first told me about adopting Aria, but this time, the conversation would shatter my understanding of my place in this family. Dad cleared his throat and explained that the college fund they had been building could only cover one of our educations completely. The decision had already been made. The money would go toward Aria's art education because she had suffered enough in her early life and deserved this opportunity to flourish. They assured me that I was smart and capable enough to figure out alternative funding through student loans and part-time jobs. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand as she explained that sometimes families have to make difficult sacrifices for the member who needs the most support. I sat there feeling like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. 13 years of straight A grades, leadership positions, and athletic achievements had culminated in this moment where I was told that my future was less important than my sister's. I managed to choke out the words that I understood and that family should always come first, but inside, I felt something break that would never quite heal the same way. I ended up attending community college for my first 2 years, working 25 hours per week at a local restaurant to pay for my classes and books. While Aria flourished in her art academy, posting pictures of her beautiful campus and exciting projects on social media, I studied in the break room during my shifts and fell asleep over textbooks every night. The exclusion only intensified as we both entered our adult years. By the time I was 23, I was working 2 jobs while finishing my nursing degree, struggling with student loan payments that would follow me for decades. Aria, now 19, was thriving at her prestigious school, with every expense covered by our parents, who had taken out a second mortgage on their house to ensure she never had to worry about money. Family gatherings became exercises in endurance for me. Every conversation revolved around Aria's latest art exhibition or the famous instructor who had praised her work. When I finally graduated with my nursing degree, we had a small dinner at a chain restaurant. When Aria's work was featured in a gallery showing in New York City, our entire extended family flew out for the weekend, staying in expensive hotels and taking professional photographs to commemorate the occasion. I was not invited to that gallery opening because, as Mom explained, there was a limited guest list and they knew I would understand. That Christmas Aria unwrapped thousands of dollars worth of professional art supplies, while I received practical gifts like a coffee maker and a set of dish towels for my apartment. I realized that I had become a ghost in my own family, present for major holidays and important events, but somehow invisible when it came to genuine love and attention. I stopped expecting phone calls on my achievements and learned to celebrate my successes alone in my small apartment, wondering how the little girl who had been so excited about having a sister had ended up feeling like a stranger in her own family. Everything changed on the week leading up to my 25th birthday party. I had decided to host the celebration at my parents' house, hoping that organizing a special event might help me reconnect with my family. Maybe if I showed them how much effort I was putting into bringing everyone together, they would remember that I was still their daughter too. I arrived at the house on a Thursday afternoon to set up decorations and prepare for the weekend celebration. Mom was at work and Dad was traveling for a construction project, so I had the house to myself for a few hours. I was hanging streamers in the dining room when I accidentally bumped into Mom's purse, which was sitting on the kitchen counter. The contents spilled across the floor, and I quickly got down on my hands and knees to gather everything up. Among the usual items like her wallet and keys, I noticed a manila folder labeled Aria Legal Documents in Mom's careful handwriting. I figured these were probably her adoption papers or medical records, so I picked up the scattered pages to put them back in order. That was when I saw something that made my entire world shift on its axis. The birth certificate I was holding did not list unknown parents as I had always believed. Instead, it clearly showed that Aria was the daughter of Karen Thompson, my mother's younger sister, who had died in a car accident when I was young. The father was listed as unknown, but there was no question about the mother's identity. My hands started shaking as I stared at the document. Aria was not some random child my parents had rescued from the foster system. She was our cousin, my blood relative, a member of our family who had been living with us under false pretenses for 13 years. I sat down heavily on the kitchen floor trying to process what this meant for everything I thought I knew about our family dynamic. I knew I should put the papers away and pretend I had never seen them, but I could not help myself from looking further. Hidden deeper in the folder were journal entries in my mother's handwriting dated from 13 years ago. As I read her words, the full truth began to emerge, and it was more devastating than I could have imagined. According to Mom's diary entries, her sister Karen had gotten pregnant when she was only 16 years old. The family was so ashamed of the situation that they kicked Karen out of the house and refused to provide any support during her pregnancy or the years that followed. Karen had struggled as a single mother living in poverty and working multiple jobs just to keep herself and Aria housed and fed. When Karen died in that car accident, Mom was overwhelmed with guilt about how the family had treated her sister. She decided to adopt Aria not just to give her a good home, but to somehow make up for the years of neglect and rejection that Karen had endured. But instead of telling everyone the truth about Aria's parentage, she created an elaborate story about adopting an orphan child from foster care. All the extra attention, all the favoritism, all the financial sacrifices suddenly made perfect sense. Aria was not just an adopted child who needed extra support. She was Mom's way of atoning for the family's treatment of her deceased sister. Every art class, every expensive supply, every gallery opening was Mom trying to give Aria the opportunities that Karen never had. As I sat on that kitchen floor surrounded by the evidence of my family's deception, I felt angry and vindicated and heartbroken all at the same time. For 13 years, I had blamed myself for not being lovable enough to earn my parents' attention. I had wondered what was wrong with me that made them prefer Aria over their own biological daughter. Now I understood that the favoritism had nothing to do with my worth as a person and everything to do with my mother's complicated feelings about guilt and family loyalty. The night of my birthday party arrived, and I walked through the motions of being a gracious host while the truth burned inside me like a secret fire. Extended family members filled our house, catching up on each other's lives and celebrating another year of my existence. When Aria arrived looking stunning in a vintage dress she had found at an art district boutique, she immediately became the center of attention as guests admired her latest paintings and asked about her upcoming graduation. During the traditional speech portion of the evening, Mom stood up to address the gathered crowd. She launched into her familiar narrative about how our family had been blessed by the addition of Aria, describing her journey from a traumatized orphan to a confident young artist. She spoke about the importance of giving children second chances and how adoption had enriched all of our lives. I watched the faces of our relatives as they nodded along with Mom's inspiring story, and I felt something snap inside me. I could not sit there for one more second, listening to this elaborate fiction while my own accomplishments and needs continued to be minimized. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor, and the room fell silent. "Before we continue celebrating tonight," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "there is something everyone should know about our family." I walked to the kitchen and retrieved the manila folder, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Aria is not an adopted orphan from foster care. She is our cousin, the daughter of Mom's sister, Karen, and our family has been living a lie for 13 years. The silence that followed was deafening. I showed the birth certificate to my aunt and uncle, watching their faces change as they recognized their sister's name. Aria looked completely confused and hurt, staring at Mom with an expression of betrayal that mirrored my own feelings. Mom tried to interrupt with damage control, claiming that I was stressed from work and not thinking clearly, but I had already opened the floodgates. One by one, family members began asking questions that Mom could not answer without revealing more of the truth. Why had they hidden Aria's real parentage? What had happened to Karen during those years when the family cut her off? How long had they been planning to keep this secret? The room erupted into chaos as people took sides, some defending Mom's decision to protect Aria from painful family history, others expressing shock that such a deception had been maintained for so long. The aftermath of my birthday revelation was swift and brutal. For the next week, my phone rang constantly with family members demanding explanations, offering support, or expressing their anger about my decision to expose the truth. Mom and Dad accused me of ruining our family's harmony out of jealousy and resentment. They claimed I had always been bitter about sharing their attention with Aria, and that I had used this information as a weapon to hurt everyone involved. Aria sent me a series of text messages that broke my heart. She felt betrayed by everyone questioning whether any of the love she had received over the years was genuine or simply the result of guilt and obligation. She wondered aloud whether she would have been better off never knowing the truth about her parentage, and she accused me of destroying her sense of security and belonging for my own selfish reasons. Some family members supported my decision to reveal the truth, arguing that I had a right to understand why I had been treated as a secondary priority in my own home. Others felt that I should have kept the secret for the sake of family peace, believing that some truths are too painful to share. The division created lasting rifts that would take years to heal. In the weeks that followed, I initially regretted speaking up at the party. Maybe I should have confronted Mom privately or found a gentler way to process this information. The guilt was overwhelming as I watched my family struggle with the consequences of my revelation. I started seeing a therapist to help me work through the complex emotions surrounding years of feeling invisible and unloved. Through therapy, I gradually began to understand that my parents' favoritism toward Aria had been driven by their guilt about Karen rather than any deficiency in my worthiness as their daughter. Mom's inability to save her sister had manifested as an overprotective, indulgent relationship with Aria. While this understanding helped me process my childhood experiences, it did not erase the years of feeling like I mattered less than my adopted sister. I learned to set healthy boundaries with my family members, refusing to accept guilt trips about my decision to reveal the truth. I focused on building a life that brought me genuine satisfaction, developing friendships with people who valued me for my own qualities, rather than comparing me to someone else. My nursing career flourished as I found purpose in helping patients during their most vulnerable moments. Slowly, very slowly, I stopped seeking my parents' approval or competing with Aria for their attention. I realized that their love had always been conditional and complicated by factors that had nothing to do with me. Finding peace meant accepting that some relationships would never be what I had hoped they could be. Several months later, Aria reached out to me through a carefully worded email. She wanted to understand our family's history and rebuild our relationship based on honesty, rather than the guilt and secrecy that had shaped our interactions for so many years. We met for coffee and talked for hours about our different perspectives on growing up in the same house. While we may never be as close as I once imagined sisters should be, we have found a way to respect each other as adults who were both affected by our parents' complicated choices. My parents have never fully apologized for their years of favoritism, but they have acknowledged that their handling of the situation was unfair to me. We maintain cordial relationships during holidays and family gatherings, though the easy intimacy of my childhood is something that can never be recovered. Looking back on that chaotic birthday party, I understand that revealing the truth was necessary for my own emotional health, even though it caused pain for everyone involved. Sometimes the truth is not kind, but it is the foundation upon which genuine relationships can be built. I have learned that protecting other people's comfort at the expense of my own well-being is not a sustainable way to live. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything you thought you knew about your relationships? Share your story in the comments below, because sometimes we need to know that we are not alone in navigating complicated family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life tales about finding strength in difficult situations. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that their truth matters too. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your voice and your experiences are valuable even when others try to make you feel invisible. May you find the courage to speak your truth when it matters most.